on the bit.
Good afternoon. How are you all doing? Are you ready for a fabulous discussion? Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to introduce my panelists. First panelist is Vanessa Bannerman. Vanessa is the co-owner of Christie Brown, a modern Ghanaian luxury brand. I'm sure you've all heard of Christie Brown, haven't you? Okay, so Vanessa has many, many years, over a decade of experience in retail and product management, and she brings this unique expertise to the business of fashion. Sorry, I'm struggling with my mic. She aims to satisfy the stylish urge of the woman seeking a true taste of neo-African culture. Welcome, Vanessa Bannerman. Hi, Vanessa.
Hi. Hello, hello, hello.
Okay, next we have Femi Asante. Femi is the CEO of Group Sebastien. She is one of Ghana's most dynamic leaders whose work as an attorney, entrepreneur, and CEO reflects a lifelong commitment to serving society. It says she oversees, if you're reading her profile, but she's the founder and chief magical officer of Red Chili, Sandbox Beach Resort, the School of the Culinary Arts, School of the Culinary Arts Ghana, Yummy Meals, as well as the Fair Justice Initiative, which advocates for incarcerated populations. Femi is more than a thought leader. She leads audacious companies that redefine the standard for business as usual. She's a fierce advocate for the power of women. Please welcome Femi Asante.
Hi.
Hi, Femi.
Hello.
Hi. Next, we have Marjorie Saintlot. Marjorie holds a master's in economics and financial engineering. She's passionate about technology and sustainable development of Africa. With over 17 years of international professional experience in various sectors, including telecommunications, where she worked at Orange in Cote d'Ivoire. Marjorie joined Uber in November 2019 and contributed to the launch and installation of Uber in Cote d'Ivoire. Marjorie currently runs Uber in both Cote d'Ivoire and in Ghana, and she is the co-chair of Women at Uber, and she's a sponsor of the EMEA Women Drivers Program and a member of EMEA Women at Uber. Please welcome Marjorie. Last but definitely not least, Adoma Owusu is the country manager of Visa in Ghana. In this role, she oversees all of Visa's operations in Ghana and is responsible for determining and executing on strategies for the Ghanaian market, cultivating close relationships with key decision makers, and growing the existing business and identifying new opportunities. Adoma is an accomplished financial services professional who is passionate about digital innovations and has over 20 years of experience in running a responsible business. She holds an MBA, which is a postgraduate degree in management, and a bachelor's degree in genetics and biochemistry. Please welcome Adoma. I don't know about you, I'm very excited to listen to these fantastic and fascinating women. Thank you so much. Also super excited to talk about one of my favorite things, which is gender equity. So, with that, first question, which, Vanessa, I'm going to ask you the first question. What is the difference between equality and equity? So we hear the words equity and equality used almost interchangeably. So what would you say is the difference?
Thanks for asking that, because you're right. I think a lot of people think they're one and the same thing. But when you think about equality, it's really about giving everybody the exact same resources to achieve a goal. But on the other hand, when you think about equity, it's taking into account people's unique circumstances. Not everybody has the same background, level of education, certain even exposure. So, for example, I think one of the best ways to explain this is to describe something that I keep seeing on Instagram, or even when you Google the difference between equity and equality. And it's that diagram of a number of people standing behind a wall. And on the other side of the wall is an opportunity to watch a football match. And of course, everybody has been given the opportunity to watch this match. The only problem is, amongst the 5 people standing behind the wall, only one person can actually look over the wall. Maybe one person is a little too short, so they can't reach. One person has their kid with them, so they're kind of being dragged all over the place. And one person is actually in a wheelchair. The point is, they all have equal opportunity. It is equality. But ultimately, there is a lack of equity until you give the person who is a little short a stepping stool to stand on so that they can also see over the wall. Until maybe somebody lifts up the woman with the kid, puts the kid behind her back so that she can also see over the wall. Or until maybe you build a ramp so the guy in the wheelchair can actually ramp up and still seated, see over the wall. So I think, for me, that has always been the perfect way to describe the difference between equality and equity. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So basically, it's meeting people where they are.
Right.
Providing them the supports that they need to have the same opportunity.
The same opportunity.
To watch the football
outcome.
game.
Correct. Exactly.
Right. Thank you. So, Femi, when we look at the situation in Ghana, what would you say is the status quo as far as gender equity is concerned? Do we have gender equity and diversity, would you say? Does our culture promote gender equity?
I believe that in the eyes of the law, we're considered the same. I mean, I think the population of 51% or slightly over are made up of women, right? But the question is, in practice, do we actually practice gender equity? That's the question. I think that even though there are prohibitive legislation to stop things like women, what I consider inhumane widowhood rights or banishment for suspected witches or etc., I don't think that legislation can do that only. I think we've come a long way in terms of representation of women in politics or representation of women in boardrooms, etc. But I believe that we still have a longer way to go. If you're comparing it to pre-independence, we've come a very long way. But women continue to face societal, financial discrimination across the world, and it's no different in Ghana. I think with the Me Too movement, with the Time Is Up movement that's slowly seeping into our culture, into our continent, I think it's creating even more awareness to people to get gender equity and gender balance. But I don't think that we're where we need to be. And I think that it's the onus is on us as women as much as it is on men to be able to ensure that there's gender equity. Because for me, I think with International Women's Day, you see a lot of artwork on social media. We support International Women's Day. We're running ads. Everybody's doing the sign. We're doing that. What happens on Monday morning? You know, you wonder whether the companies are accommodating women who have to resort to assisted reproductive interventions to be able to have children, or are they accommodating women who are unable to show up physically at work? Are they offering you the opportunity to be able to work from home through Zoom, or do they think you're actually not going to do the work, so you have to show up? So I don't think we're where we need to be, and I think our culture actually promotes, in a way, gender inequality. Yeah, sorry, I'm so. I feel like we do. I mean, I when I was researching this, there was a woman that which came up, and she was trying to run for office, and she said, and I wanted to share this. Her name is Agnes Akanwik in the Kassina Nankana West District Assembly in the Upper East region of Ghana. And she says, and I quote, "My community elders had a meeting with me to step down as an assemblywoman aspirant to allow a man in the community to contest unopposed. Their reason was simply because I am a woman and must not challenge a male aspirant who was contesting with me in the community because this is disrespectful. I had to step down because I had no support, but I will stand again." I think what she says actually just highlights exactly when I say culture permeates that. We're not encouraging women enough to actually have the confidence to sit in boardrooms or to go for their dreams because it'll be too much, you know. So
thank you for that.
Thank you.
That's really interesting. I think that you're right, but I also see some bright spots. So there is some research that was done that showed that Ghana had the highest number of women entrepreneurs.
Yes.
So some highlights and some lowlights. But yeah, all in all, we're not where we should be.
No, we're not where
probably.
we should be. And I think that, I mean, most entrepreneurs in this country are women.
Yeah.
You know, which is, I think, a plus. I think even in representation, either it's the local government or something has like 21%, which is high numbers for Africa. But if you look at how many women-owned companies are able to scale up.
Yes. Yes.
To actually compete internationally or even go beyond a region in Ghana. There are all these inhibitions that come into your way. So I think that as we're making great inroads, we shouldn't rest on our loins and we should actually put our conversations into action.
Yes, absolutely. So Adoma, well, why is it even important to promote gender equity?
Can you repeat that? I didn't hear that.
Why is it important to promote gender equity?
It's such an important question, Nanama, for so many reasons. I believe that a very equal society just brings opportunity for everybody in the country, especially in Ghana. So there are 4 reasons that I see why I believe that gender equality is important. Number 1, social justice issues. I think Femi and the other ladies on the panel have said quite a lot. And one of the key things really is around the fact that if people are equal, they get access to all similar opportunities, and it just helps them thrive in society. Secondly, and leads to the second point, is really around economic opportunities. If you are equal and you have access to opportunities, community thrives, right? Femi mentioned around the fact that we have the highest level, it was you, Nanama. We have the highest level of female entrepreneurs on this continent, probably even in the world. And if we're able to support women businesses to thrive, they take care of their families and the broader society. We know this as women. Thirdly, one of the things that is very crucial is that diverse communities are able to provide different solutions to address problems. And I think that if there's more gender equity, it will allow for that, So let me stay clear. But the thing is, the challenges in society right now, if you have both men and women at the table trying to address these issues, it'll be helpful. And then finally, it's really around social issues. I mean, we all know there's a lot of concern around domestic abuse, which is very prevalent. We all know people that are struggling with that. And a more equitable, if there's more gender equity, probably there'll be less of that. If a woman is empowered, they're able to leave homes where they've been abused because they have the means to be able to survive in society. So I think those are probably the reasons why I would think that gender equity is important for our country, Ghana.
Fantastic. So if I've heard you correctly, women make up half the society. And so in a very real sense, if we're not maximizing what we're getting from half of the population, we're not making the most of everything. In addition to that, women play this very special role in society. And so when we empower women, we empower the whole society.
Definitely. Spot on. Yeah.
Great. So Marjorie, Adoma has told us about the importance of gender equity in society. Now, we know that in business and in the world today, technology is incredibly important. So please tell us a little bit about why perhaps it's important to have gender equity in business, but particularly in technology.
Yeah, so I think if I want to answer that question, I actually want to answer it the other way around, is what does technology does for diversity and gender equity? And I think this is where digitalization has really enabled lifted some of the traditional barriers that we saw in women entrepreneurship. Some of the things that we can think about is access to funding, typically, like the acceleration of fintechs, adaptation of business models to address some of the women entrepreneurs that were unfortunately not addressed by the traditional systems. But not only that, we can think about marketing, how we're leveraging, social networks to market and sell our business ideas at costs that couldn't even be imagined 20 years ago. When we think about last mile delivery, so I'm thinking about the one that's, cooking in her home and trying to start her home catering business. Yeah. The ability to leverage platforms to deliver is being enabled. So I think digitalization has really started to lift some of these barriers. And this is why, and it also has been able to narrow the gap between males and women. When I think about transport, more particularly, and I'd like to maybe share the example of Saudi, where we've partnered up with the government. At the time, women contribution in the labor force was about 20%. The ambition was to get to about 35% in 10 years. Through tech, it was done in 4 years.
Wow.
And after 4 years, we started with a group first of 300 women. After 4 years, it's 120 women that are leveraging. It's 40% increase in retention. It's 80% of them that are saying, I now have accessibility to jobs because I'm able to move around. In an environment, again, I choose Saudi just because of all the societal barriers that you can imagine for a woman. So it's very, very powerful how it was enabled. And even closer to home, I'm thinking about a woman driver being able to say, I only want to ride with women. So we've created a product that allows drivers to only pick women riders. So it's live in South Africa and other markets, but it's coming very quickly in our markets. When we know that safety is one of the #1 reasons for not going into that field. So here's just a few examples of how you can, gender equity is important in business, but more importantly, there are some things that can be done through tech to actually bring more value of women in our society.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And also probably talking about girls, helping girls to access information and education as well. Vanessa, your business is a very special business in that it is women-owned and run, and the majority of your employees are women.
Right.
Yeah. So how can organizations foster a culture of inclusion that values diversity and equity? What are some of the things that you do at Christie Brown?
I think first and foremost, organizations have to decide what kind of culture they want. And in knowing the kind of culture that you would like to promote, you can take the necessary steps to address some of these equality issues within your organization. Because I think looking at the equity issue, it seems like a mountain that is almost impossible to climb. It seems overwhelming. It seems impossible to address all the issues at the same time. And for example, at Christie Brown, we do put our, we consider the fact that our female employees are really the backbone of the business. Like you said, the business is female-owned, female-run, female-led. So first things first is to make sure that your leadership representation within your organization looks like the people you want to serve. So if you have, at Christie Brown, if the leaders at Christie Brown were not female, it'd be almost impossible for you to understand what your female employees need. What barriers they have, what their issues are. It would even be difficult if they were to explain it to you for you to understand if you weren't able to put yourself in their position. So I think representation is key. Secondly, just being able to create an environment that allows your employees to share what it is that they need to move to the next level, what would really promote equity within the organization. And it's different from one organization to the other. So again, looking at Christie Brown, our atelier, our production facility is in the heart of Colegono. I mean, it is in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Accra. And we hire from the community. So the truth is, if you can't understand what the person who lives in Colegono needs, first and foremost, for her to decide that 1, she can come to work, 2, she can stay at work for 8 hours, 3, that she's left her kids at home and that there may or may not be somebody to take care of her, and that we as an organization haven't thought this through, tried to figure out ways for her to work around some of these barriers, then we haven't put her in a position to actually be equal to some of the male employees that we do hire. So it's looking at things like that. Do we have town halls? And we just had one as part of International Women's Day and celebrating the women in our organization, sitting down with our employees, females, where it's just them, and giving them access not just to us, but to people within their community. We had a healthcare professional. We had the market leader in Colegono come and sit with them and just share what are some of the things that you can be doing. Do you get a little side gig after hours when you leave Christie Brown, so that we're promoting financial inclusion. It's not just about working at Christie Brown maybe from 8 to 5 and then going home. What else do you want for yourself? Because that is really, that is what, in our opinion, promoting equity is. Where are your children when you come here? Who do you leave them with? Is it looking for a neighborhood daycare? Speaking to the daycare and seeing whether or not our employees are able to leave their kids there and it's closer to work so that they have that peace of mind to actually do what they need to do. And of course, this is me explaining this at a very different level, but this is my reality. These are the women that I work with every single day. So that is Christie Brown's commitment, is really being able to connect with the people who actually contribute to the growth of your business and understanding what their needs are, however, and then figuring out how to address those needs. It might seem very simple, it might seem like low-hanging fruit that you can actually ignore, but it's not. This is the difference between allowing somebody to actually create a life for themselves or leaving people behind, and that's really not what we're about. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful to hear about how you're impacting lives. It sounds as though your approach is to look at the whole person, the whole woman, where she's coming from, and what she needs, and then to build your organization around empowering women in that way. That's very powerful. So, but Adoma, that sort of approach is, I think, wonderful. But for a global organization, probably you have to do things a little bit differently. So from your perspective, what are some of the policies and practices, best practices, that are helpful for larger organizations to promote gender equity?
So Vanessa, I would like to commend you. I think you guys, what you're doing is absolutely incredible. You know, when you buy your clothes, we know that it's trickling down and really benefiting society. So I was really, it was really nice to hear that. So Nanama, what you're saying is so, so true. As a global organization, one has to be very, very intentional to ensure that there is diversity and inclusion. And it's got to start from the top. So apart from the employees, there's got to be buy-in from senior management and all people within the organization, frankly. And you've got to be very, very intentional about it. I think it's got to start from your values, right? So you've got to live this. This is going to be a part of what it is that you do as an organization. So at Visa, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is that we value and encourage diversity and inclusion. And we're very, very focused and very intentional about it. So it's got to come through in your values. So it's got to be stated in your values. Secondly, you need to be able to walk the talk. So actually have practices that support the hiring of diverse individuals. We all know this, that when people that are diverse come together, when they try to solve for problems or they try to decide on things, it's just different because people bring different perspectives, bring different life experiences into making decisions. Thirdly, I think it's important to celebrate diversity. So if it is a case of Ramadan is coming in the next, I think it's next week. So for your Muslim employees, give them the time to be able to go and observe it, you know. So in Dubai, so we have a big hub in Central Europe, Middle East and Africa, where the workload is a lot lighter for folks because, you know, if you haven't been eating for the whole day, you're not as productive as you could be, right? So in the evening, perhaps if you've had a meal, you can pick it up there. So there's certain things that one needs to be able to be mindful of. And I also think that it's important to be able to track it. So it's all good and well to have these lofty ideals, but track them. Track them so that everybody knows that this is the goal that we are working towards from a diversity and inclusion perspective, and this is where we are at with regards to it. You know, so in our organization, as I indicated, we are very, very intentional. These are some of the things that we put in place to make sure that we are encouraging of it. I mean, in 2020, when we had George Floyd and all of these issues that came up, Visa, as a company, stood up and realized that there's so much more that we can do, right, in terms of society. So we supported historically black colleges and universities. We got a cohort in of black interns. You know, so these are some of the ways we've been very deliberate around the diversity and inclusion conversation.
Wow, that's, I think that's very, very powerful. And I think, you know, as you mentioned, diversity and inclusion, it's not just about, you know, diversity and inclusion, but it's about, you know, it's impressive that as such a large organization, you can do some of the things that it sounds like Christie Brown is doing. That's wonderful. So Vanessa Marjorie and Femi, let's come back to you. And listening to what Vanessa and Adoma have said to us, how can we leverage technology to help to improve the gender equity in organizations, in businesses? Marjorie?
Sure. I think I've kind of touched a base on it, but I think it's an opportunity to showcase a bit of what we do at Uber from a product perspective. One of the things that that evolved is that we've created a specific team, the product equity design team, and their job is really to look at every single product that is made by Uber, whether it be for a driver or rider from a safety perspective, that it takes in consideration equity, and more importantly, that it doesn't create further biases amongst vulnerable people or group of people. And it's a multi, there are different professions of people in that process. So there's a design team, so engineers actually look at that, led by a diversity specialist. And then there's an independent committee that comes and confirms what comes out of that process. So I think it's very powerful how we're approaching things and how we're creating products to ensure that they encourage equity and they take in consideration diversity. Even in our approach to talent, because I think to be able to do that, you have to have a workforce that is representative of the clients that you're serving, like Vanessa mentioned. And so there too, through our external program that we call You Steer, we showcase different profiles, different career paths, as well as different segments of ethnicity as well, right, and gender, to ensure that young ladies, when they come and tap at Uber's door, they find some element of connection with the brand to saying, hey, there's somebody that looks like me. And yes, in tech, there's not just nerds. It's not just about coding. There are other career paths, and they make it accessible to people. And I think one of the things that we found is that our recruitment process maybe were misunderstood. So even there's targeted support to help the underserved population to get through the recruiting portion. And then lastly is on retention, right? How we're leveraging tech to ensure that women find their place. So through hybrid work, through building strong communities across the company, like Uber, Women at Uber, and leveraging all of the tools that we have internally to train, mentor, uplift the different, whether it be women, Black hat, whether it be Asians, whether it be people with disabilities, all actual segments are taken into consideration and allowing them to be uplifted.
So it sounds like Adoma had touched on measuring. So setting the goals and measuring and tracking. So it sounds like you're using the technology in doing just those things. Femi, what are some of the strategies to help improve underrepresentation? I think very important thing that Vanessa said is that because women are at the table that decisions are being made at, they bring that perspective to the decision making, to figuring out what the values are and shaping policies. And so what are some of the strategies to help improve underrepresentation?
So most of my work is in the hospitality industry, through restaurants, beach club, etc. And you find that for my first restaurant that I started 15 years ago, Red Chili. It's traditional cuisine at its best. So a lot of the women who work in Red Chili are not as educated or don't have any formal training in cooking, but they're one of the best cooks you will find. I noticed that they didn't feel so confident about the work that they do. They just felt like they were cooks. They just show up at work and they cook. They take somebody else who is more educated takes the order, and they work in the back office. So one of the things that we did is to empower them. So the supervisor at Red Chili, Auntie Pearl, who is the one who has the secret recipe for the Red Chili Jollof, sits in meetings with all of us. Now, because we run from a corporate head office and there are different business units, we taught her how to use Zoom. So she's super excited to key into Zoom to join the meeting. She has her time to speak. Her opinions are listened to. Her suggestions are documented in the minutes of the meeting. We'll share it with her. And we realize that through that, she feels empowered enough that whenever they're doing like a documentary or somebody's coming into the Red Chili space, she's the first person we introduce them to. So that way she gets the confidence to be able to speak in it. It's not me that you'll see when you go to Red Chili, you see all the other staff. We had a staff who couldn't read, and she was a cleaner at Red Chili, Gifty, and she was determined to learn how to read. So she would actually tell the girls in the front to only speak to her in English. She gradually went from being able to clean to bagging food because she could identify the words as banku and okro, etc. And we constantly encouraged her, highlighting the work that they do at our annual, what we also have our town hall meetings also gives them that power. And we try and make sure that when we have to disseminate information on policies, we actually tweak it to suit them. So if we're having a town hall at Red Chili, it'll be more infographics, so that they can see when we say how we should work at teamwork should be like. If we're having that same town hall meeting at Sandbox, you could have that type of conversation because of the caliber of staff that we hire. So I think being intentional in how we ensure that everybody feels like they are just as important as the CEO, anybody in the C-suite management is one thing that we also do. In addition, because we have to oversee different operations and different units, we're employing a lot of technology to be able to do that. So if you book at any one of our restaurants, you'd get a confirmation from 7 Rooms or whatever, whichever software that is being employed by then. Our feedback form is automated, and all that information and data that we collect is not only shared by C-suite management anymore, it has to trickle down all the way down to the person who actually takes the order, to the cleaners. Everybody's included in the morning briefs or the weekly updates or the targets or et cetera. So I think being intentional about how we approach it and also letting them catch up with the technology, because I think technology is actually easier when you understand it than even if you don't have as much education, So making sure that we're actually tutoring them on how to use, whether it's the Google or whatever that we're using, is important for us to be able to rope everybody in so that we can actually get the benefits of actually employing that technology is something that we focus on.
So lots of talk about being intentional and meeting people where they are. We've been talking at you for a while. I'm wondering whether there are any questions that any of you would like to ask one of the panelists.
Don't be shy.
Yeah. Yes. The lady in the red.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for your wise words and your inspiration. I am a lecturer at an institution, not going to name it. We have about 70 to 80% women at our school. It's a university here. However, when we look at the leadership of the school, both in terms of, I guess, the educators, the administrators, and also the students, there's never been a female SRC president in the whole of the history of the school. And I've spoken to some of my students about why that is the case. Most of the women don't even think it's possible or that they should be in these positions, even though they can. So my question is, she spoke earlier about the fact that legally women are equal here in Ghana, but in practice, we tend to do the opposite. What can we do for our young girls right now to inspire them, to empower them, to ensure them that they can, they will be awesome at it, all of these things? What can we do to make them take those steps to be the leaders that they can be?
Thank you so much. That's a great question. Is it directed at anybody in particular? Anyone. Okay. Okay, I think Adoma had a response.
Thank you. That is a great question. Can you hear me okay? So on International Women's Day, I had quite a number of invitations in terms of how to honor the day. And one of the invitations was from the Girl Scouts of Ghana. And I thought, you know what, I think my time will probably better spent with the young ladies, the future ladies, future leaders of our country. And I spent an hour there with them, and it was absolutely phenomenal, right? And in there, I was there with the lady Sanusi, who is an amazing maker of bridal wear. And so in there, we just broke it down and just spoke about our stories, right? Where in our households, I'll speak about my household, in our household where we are 5 children, 3 boys, 2 girls, we were given the same treatment, basically. So I think it started at home is really, really important. Secondly, we got to encourage the girl child to be able to know that they can do more. And I think if more of us spent time with the younger ladies, future leaders of our country, it's very, very helpful. So at the end of the session, a young girl came up to me, and she just started high school. She came from a place where, you know, she couldn't speak English that well, and she didn't feel comfortable coming to speak to me then. She waited until the end of the session. And what she said is that, her parents have sacrificed so much to bring her to the school where she's at now. And because she can't pronounce words well, people laugh at her, and her whole thing was, well, what can I do? And she was in tears, and I was so upset, that this girl was just trying to do her best. And I just tried to encourage her. Luckily, there was somebody from the education service there. And I said, please speak to the school and the guidance counselors to see what they can do to empower them. Anyway, so the whole point I'm trying to say is that we need to be there for younger girls. Let us mentor them. Let us know that it is possible. Let them see that there are women that are challenging the status quo, that we feel that we can do it. And if people see more examples of this, perhaps it will help them to be able to take up more of the leadership positions at the university or elsewhere.
I think just writing off of what Adoma just said is the fact that a lot of the women that I encounter, young women in university, not sure what they want to do, etc. They have an idea, but most of the time they don't know how to. The how to is probably the most difficult thing to figure out. Mm-hmm. So they're also not seeing a lot of examples, local examples or continent specific examples. So you can see somebody who says, well, one of my inspirations is an international person, let's say an Oprah or something, but she's working in a totally different environment than this environment. She doesn't have the same cultural context that we have here. And I think that it's important to share more stories, more real stories, on how Christie Brown was built or how Adoma came to be in her position as as an African woman in an international organization, or how Marjorie, or how Nanama as a lawyer, navigates her space, or etc. There needs to be more local, context-specific examples. That's one. The second one is also, we need to walk away from these encounters with these, future leaders, like Adoma said, found somebody at the education service to continue the conversation with her. Otherwise, you're going to walk away from a conversation with me feeling very good, feeling like it's so possible to do sandbox and more, but you're not going to know how to do it, because in that 30 minutes, I'm not able to break down to you when the lights went off, when the generator's not working, what to do, or what the strategy is like. You're not getting the intricate details. So developing an actual action plan on how to do it. So I would start off by, listen, how many of you would like to be an SRC president? What are your qualities? What are you bringing to the table? What do you feel like are the things that you don't think are your competitive advantage, and how are we going to leverage on that? How do you want to meet the voters, the people who have to vote for you? What are their demographics? What are they looking out for? Let's actually break it down into an actionable plan. And I'm very sure that when they actually see how it can be done, it actually indirectly just builds you the courage that, you know what, I know I need to have on my team somebody who's doing research on what the student populace wants. I know I need to find this person who does whatever. And through that process, they'll fail at something, guaranteed. But the question is that, what do I do when I fail? So we need to translate the motivation, the courage into an actual action plan. And after they actually have that blueprint, I feel like they'll be more encouraged to be able to take up the mantle and to be able to do it.
I think that's you've got to have a plan. You've got to have a plan. That's super, super important. But as you were talking, something occurred to me. I think it's wonderful to have a women's-only forum and for us to talk amongst ourselves and to share the stories and to share the wisdom and the experience and to strategize. But in addition to the girls having the plan and all of that, how important is it to start to engage the men in our lives so that when you talk about the people who are going to vote for the SRC president, are they also able to see a woman as an SRC president such that they would vote for the woman? Marjorie, can I ask you, how important is it to talk to engage the allies, the men in our lives?
Male allyship is so important, and I think we have a responsibility not only to highlight biases, but to deconstruct them. And it's in building those relationships with the men that are around us that we're able to practically handle and deconstruct these biases. And this is where it's so important. I remember on March 8th, I was doing a panel at Nestle, and some of the questions that we were getting from the males that were there, we understood that they're actually, like, there's a lot of work for us to do there, you know. We complain a lot, quote unquote, on these lack of opportunities, but I think the first opportunity is every time you hear somebody, a male counterpart, saying or blocking opportunities, this is the first thing that you need to deconstruct. It is that allows you, it's a combination of these conversations and these relationships that you reshape that will allow all of us to actually get elevated. And I think the other element as well is we often as women suffer from what I call the imposter syndrome. And we play in that field, like we add like spices in that environment. It's important, like Femi said, for us to speak and to share and to remain authentic about our story. It would allow, first, the younger ladies to join the journey, but more importantly, it actually cultivates that deconstruction that we need to do of these biases. Because not everybody has that perfect roadmap to leadership, right? The reality is, you're going to have a lot of failures. You're going to get back up. You'll have opportunities to rise, and you'll fall again, etc. And you don't often hear about that other side. So deconstructing biases starts with male allyship, but more importantly, it starts with authenticity.
That's so powerful. You know, and it makes me think about another topic that is maybe even sometimes a little taboo. So when you talk about biases, Vanessa, I want to ask you, I think we have to start to challenge ourselves as women. What about the idea that sometimes we as women have the biases ourselves, and you know, how we can sometimes be an obstacle to progress?
And, you know, I think we all have a little bit of that in us. You know, I personally think men do because they just believe they can. And just based on that, they go for it. I think women tend to hold themselves back a little bit because they're uncertain, they're not sure. They're not really sure where their place is in society, within an organization and culture. So they sort of wait until they feel confident enough. And if the confidence never comes, or if they never really get the push, then they never really go for what they really want. And I mean, I see it at Christie Brown all the time. And, you know, sometimes you will hear some of the staff saying, oh, we have a community cleaning exercise, or a company cleaning exercise. And the women will say, well, it's fine if the guys don't do it. It's a woman's thing anyway. Cleaning is for the women. And they would leave the guys to continue to work, and then they will go ahead and they will, you know, come together and they will clean the compound. And if you sort of allow people to just assume that position because either that's how they were raised, that's how they were trained, that's what is just expected of them, then they won't actually expect better for them, for themselves, or they won't actually think that they are equal to men, because naturally they tend to put men on a pedestal or assume that they are not required to do certain things. So I think it is in having those conversations and not just talking about it. Talking about it sometimes doesn't really do anything. It is insisting. Everybody does it or nobody does it. So if we're cleaning, everybody has to get their hands dirty. Whether or not you believe the man sitting next to you shouldn't have to do it, well, here it's done. And the more you put some of these things into practice, the more they sort of start seeing themselves as equal to the person who's sitting next to them. Because does the person actually have better skills than you? They do not. But just culturally, they tend to believe that they are at a disadvantage or less than. And it's in actioning some of those things and forcing it within your organization that you'll actually start seeing people building that confidence to, you know, see themselves as equal to others, and in which case they will stand for SRC president. They will feel like, well, if you can be president, what makes me different or incapable of doing it? You don't have skills that are better than mine. Maybe my English is not as strong as yours, but I'm not at a disadvantage because I have other things that I'm bringing to the table, like Femi said. And not everybody speaks English, so maybe English might not be the key thing. So it's that, and it's allowing people to just feel like they have certain strengths and they should always bring that to the fore. And in an organization, you can insist on promoting that. And then I think, secondly, there's a lot of sensitivity training that needs to happen in our organizations. People just think it's okay to not be sensitive to things that impact women. If something bothers a woman, it is okay that it bothers her, and you have to respect that. But I think culturally we accept when people say, well, you're being a crybaby about that, or that's not important, or if you're not tough enough to power through this, maybe you're having a bad time in the month, then you are not strong enough to lead. And sometimes it does a number on us as women. We do start believing that, and there's a physical manifestation of that as well. We do less and we shrink ourselves physically, and then we're not seen. So it is dispelling some of these things. It is, you know, championing some of these, having these conversations and making sure that women realize that, you know, you are valued, and whatever it is you're going through is important, and bringing it to the fore means it will be heard and it will be taken into account. And the more organizations that do that, the more confident women will feel in standing for themselves and insisting on equality.
I just wanted to add something on what Vanessa said. and about if we ourselves are holding the biases, right? I find that culturally we equate strength for women as how much they're able to endure.
Very true.
Yeah, like you hear people say when a woman complains about something, there's a million examples of other women who've endured and reached the promised land. With whatever the promised land is. But the thing is, I believe that as a woman, you should know, or you should find yourself and know who you are, what you want to become, what you're able to take, what you're not able to take. And if I sit in a room with, like here on this panel, maybe what I can take without it affecting me is very small compared to what Vanessa can take. But it doesn't make us any less strong. We're indirectly permeating the culture of strength is how much you're able to endure late hours, how much you're able to endure, a bad marriage, or how much you're able to endure disrespect. But we have to insist that it could work for somebody else, but it doesn't work for me. And so because it doesn't work for me, we're going to have to engage on another level. We're going to have to engage at that level of respect that doesn't let me walk away feeling any less of a woman, or feeling undervalued, or feeling like it's okay for you to think that I may not be able to run a company with 200 staff. That's fine. But it's not okay for you to articulate that in a way that I walk away feeling like, I'm just not up to the task. You can say that and feel like, well, I don't think she has enough experience to take up this position, but you have to be able to tell me what experience you're asking for to be able to do it, so that I can check that to see whether I should be hired for this position or whether I even want to work for you in the first place. I will end by saying last week we hired a supervisor for a sandbox, and she didn't take the offer. She had come for a trial. I thought she was excellent. And I asked that she should come in to have a conversation with me. And she said, I'd rather be a hostess than to be a supervisor, because I don't want to have to tell somebody that, they're not doing their work right, or I don't want to have to tell, because she just didn't feel like, she could take up that responsibility. And I said to her, well, I don't have a position for a hostess for you, but I know how I can help you to develop the skills to be able to be an excellent supervisor, where you don't feel responsible for doing the right thing, and if somebody has to bear the repercussions of it, it's not hanging on your head.
Wow. That's wonderful. I can't believe we've run out of time. We have 2 minutes. I want to go around and ask each of you a question, and please, 30 seconds. So Adoma, we got some questions from online about what would you advise young women who are just starting out, who maybe are not in the most nurturing and empowering environments? What would you advise them to do in order to stand up for themselves, to advocate for themselves, and to advocate for the supports that they might need, particularly as Black women, to thrive?
It's a tough one, because as Black women, we are still striving and pushing, Sisterhood is important. We all met at an event that Femi organized a year ago, right? And we sat there, a bunch of ladies who a lot of us didn't know each other, but that whole evening, we did not stop speaking, right? So I think finding a community that can support you will help you, so find other women of color within your organization, be able to share your experiences, and perhaps maybe there's some gems or other truths that they can impart on you that can help you to advocate for yourself. Another thing that I have found very, very important in my career is around the value of a mentor. Perhaps there's somebody within the organization who is more senior to you that you feel is approachable and that can help you shape you through your leadership, your career journey. And then lastly, as you progress in your career as well, the value of a sponsor. And a sponsor is very different from a mentor. So a sponsor is somebody who takes you by the hand and drags you through the organization. But in order to be able to have a right sponsor, you need to be excellent at what it is that you do. Right? A sponsor is not going to take anybody who doesn't work hard. So I think, there's so much more I could say, but in my 30 seconds, I think those are the three things. Find a community that can support you, get a mentor, and as you progress, get a sponsor.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm going to come to Vanessa. Vanessa, this is a question that everybody asks. What 3 pieces of advice would you give your younger self about whether or not it's possible to become the owner of a business, to found the business, and to thrive in business? Because you came from industry and then you moved into the entrepreneurship space.
I am my younger self. I think, honestly, I kind of alluded to it in the beginning, is you know what your values are, know what's important to you. Because when you start out, you kind of have to do certain things that you don't necessarily enjoy. Your first job might not necessarily be one that you love. You might end up being in a position that might just be a stepping stone, or it might just be your way to get into the door, right? And that was my experience when I was in industry, let's say. I ended up working, I had a finance background, and now I work in fashion. And there's still a lot of numbers behind it, but the point is, my first job was about getting through the door. And I would tell myself, I would hope that I would remind myself that you need to know what your values are. What are you looking for in an organization? And if that's not what you are getting from where you currently are, as you grow, don't forget what those values are. Don't settle because you are growing within an organization. Hold on to those values and transition and do what really makes you happy over time. Because it's really easy. 10 years comes really quickly. So many people feel like they know the recipe to you building the perfect business, or you being an amazing employee, or you moving up the ladder in your corporation. The truth is, it is your journey and your journey alone. And so what brings you closer to where you really want to be are your values. If you don't have them, or if you let go of them because you're earning enough money, or because you're too scared to move to the next company because you're not happy where you are, you'll never really be happy. And then that's where the things like inequality, you start compromising on inequality, you start compromising on things that are not necessarily in line with who you are because you've just eventually settled. And it happens really quickly. So that's the advice I'd give my younger self.
Hold on to your values. And don't betray yourself by settling.
No.
Right. Thank you so much. Femi, I'm going to come to you last but not least, Marjorie. Femi, listening to you, you're very confident, you're very powerful, and it's clear that you've advocated for yourself powerfully. But what about, we're not all that confident, right? Some of us are introverts. Some of us have been socialized to not present as powerful because culturally it's not acceptable. So I want you to give advice to somebody who is the direct opposite of yourself. They know what they're about, they're ambitious, but there may be an environment where it's not accepted to come out as strongly as you do. What advice would you give a young lady in that situation? I know, it's totally different. You have to imagine that you're somebody else.
So my confidence, I get that a lot, but my confidence is derived from my faith in God. If I'm making sense. I don't think, well, maybe I'm naturally wired like this because I'm just naturally was the kid who was literally assertive and I got into a lot of trouble growing up for just having a sharp tongue and like feeling like everything was just injustice. Maybe that's why I ended up being a criminal defense attorney, but I think that's what it was. But I think that at some point, every time I get shut down by my aunties or like, Femi just too much, or she just said too much, I just always, my grandmother would always remind me that I was enough. That I was perfectly made, I was wonderfully, fearfully made. That, all those like affirmations. I tell people that you should sort of like be your own hype woman. If that what would I tell the person? Because they know what they're about, they know what they want to do. So you should be your own hype woman. Like, I don't need you to validate my dreams, So it's enough for me to have conceived that idea. I may not be able to stand on a podium to address a crowd, but I know my stuff. Like actually putting work into whatever it is that you're doing. So if you want to be a makeup artist or something, to actually do the work, to actually, I don't care if you can't go to the best makeup school, there's YouTube, you have a phone that can access Instagram, you have a phone that can access a tutorial. So I'm going to put all my efforts into doing that. And I think that through that, for me, I feel like it's important that women is based on merit. It's like, if you do those tutorials, whether or not you're a good speaker or not, or you actually invest in your craft, eventually, without people even hearing you speak, they'll hear of you. It's just like how you can hear about a seamstress or a very good watcher joint in somewhere where they don't have social media, or they're not using it as actively as, any one of my companies, but you hear about a place somewhere that they actually make really good food, and you actually go there and stuff. So I think just to that person, it would be continue to invest in your craft, continue to develop yourself. It'll build your confidence indirectly, because the more you know, the more knowledgeable you are, the more confident you are to actually, speak to your people in your contemporaries or people in your industry, etc. I think that finding something that gives you like a positive, whether it's your faith or whether it's your community or both of them in addition, and being intentional about the spaces that you go into. Mm-hmm. If you go into a space that's making you walk out feeling, like you need to put your head down, you don't need to be in that space. If you go into a space where you have to second guess yourself, you don't need that environment. So I think it's just being intentional about it as you map out to be able to get to where you are.
Thank you so much. Marjorie, now you are a mother of 4. You are one of the busiest people I know. You're always on a plane, doing 1,000,001 things. What's your advice for a young lady starting out who wants to have everything? She wants to have the family, she wants to have the amazing job, she wants to be impactful in society, not just with her work. What's your advice for them? Like, how do you keep all those plates up in the air without breaking any?
Okay. Oh, wow. You become what you believe. Right? So I think for me is I accepted that I'm not going to be perfect at everything, but I will give my best to everything. The second thing that's important is, I give myself a break. I challenge myself a lot. I don't accept the notion of a room that I cannot enter in. I think it's my competitive edge that I've always had. I used to run track as a child, and I maintain that competitive edge. In the relationship that I have with my children, wherever I am, we're connected all day. And I'm very honest and transparent with them. Again, like, authenticity is key. It's key in everything that you do, with your children, with your husband, with your employer. It's important to be real. And it's important to be real with yourself, right? Which is why I started by you become what you believe. So if you know yourself well and you understand your weaknesses and you know which strength you can leverage on, and Femi said it at some point, you define your boundaries, then you walk as what you believe and you do become what you want to become. So I think for me, I challenge myself daily. I accept that I'm going to fall. It's okay. And I remain transparent and authentic in everything that I do.
Thank you so much, ladies. I hope that you all have enjoyed the conversation as much as I have. I wanted to just sum up very quickly. We have unfortunately run out of time. Sum up some of the wisdom that we have heard from the amazing panelists. Equity is about meeting people where they are and providing everybody with the supports that they need in order for us to have equal opportunity. Equity is important because if we don't have an equitable society, we are quite literally not getting the most out of 50% of whatever population we're talking about, whether it's the workforce or society at large. So it's very important that we not only embrace equity, but that we promote equity in all areas of life. We also heard about some of the strategies that the various enterprises that these ladies are associated with are employing to embrace equity, whether it's through technology or otherwise. But one of the key things that I think we all need to take away is we heard the word intentional very, very often. We heard intentional. We heard that you must have a plan. So having a goal without a plan is a wish or something like that anyway. You've got to have a plan. You've got to find community. You've got to find community, and you've got to find the people who are going to hold you by the hand and help you to get where you're going to, where you would like to get to. Remember who you are, and you become who you believe. So we have to challenge not only the biases that we find as we go out into the world, but also the limiting beliefs and the challenges and biases that we find in ourselves. Thank you so much. I think Nana is, okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, ladies. I hope this has been informative.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Marjorie, for giving us the opportunity. My name is Jebanatu Alabi-Sama. You can call me Jem for short. I'm the co-founder of TechConnect Africa, and we're just building a social enterprise that brings Africans globally together through tech innovation, tech education, and community building with events like this. We usually hold a big flagship event in December to sort of connect with the diaspora as well. So last year we held one in Nairobi, Lagos, and Accra. So we want to make it bigger and better in 2023. So hopefully we have you guys also join us in December. So I want to give a big shout out to our TechConnect Ghana team, the ladies in the back, Yvonne, Akusua, Kapri. So if you want to connect and learn more about what we do, please see them at that table. And last but not least, thank you to Women at Uber, Black at Uber, and our inspirational ladies for joining us today for this amazing event celebrating International Women's Month. Thank you so much, and now we can eat.